Hello, everyone. I'm doing this for the first time, and I'm glad that you're with me. This is live, and I am reading to you from the third book in The Path of Life. And this is to benefit a friend of mine and myself as I read through the Path of Life books again. So I bring it to you. I am going to start. This is the Path of Life, Book 3. And I'm going to start with the introduction. So this introduction is by Robert Andrew Anderson. And I first met Master O more than 4 years ago. A friend of mine, a fellow Tai Chi practitioner, called and said that a Qigong teacher of hers was going to be giving a workshop at her house on an upcoming Saturday morning. I was interested in attending. I answered with a polite waffle. Certainly a part of me was interested. The part is always interested in a workshop. But there were usual inner arguments against going. Couldn't afford it, had something else to do. Was it really going to be worth my while? Besides, as I told my friend, my wife and I were at that time attending a 3-month, once-a-week medical Qigong course given by a respected teacher of both Tai Chi Quan and Qigong. That maybe, she rejoined, but this class will change your life. Her words stayed with me. Whether they were decisive or not, who knows? My wife and I did attend, although as we drove to our friend's rural home that Saturday morning, I was wishing I had said no. The night before, there was an art opening at the gallery we were both members of, and the after party had formed at our house. As was usual in those days, my wife had gone to bed at a decent time, but I hadn't. I had a great time drinking with my friends, preparing food for our welcoming kitchen dining room of many such gatherings, drinking even more, and finally getting to bed around 3 a.m. I was very hungover, but I was also used to toughing it out when in such a state. Once in the Marine Corps training in Quantico, I had gotten to bed very drunk at 4 a.m., then gotten up at 6 for an all-day field exercise. And that's what I did with this workshop. Master O, it turned out, did not speak English, and the translator spoke rather softly, so I had to make extra effort to hear through the buzzing in my mind. But what was being said, not about the Qigong exercise itself, yet, but the teacher's background, experiences, and nature of what he was going to teach us succeeded in holding the attention of my bleary, sleep-deprived mind. In his 20s, Ou Wen Wei had been arrested and put into some kind of detention during the Cultural Revolution in his home province of Guangdong in southern China. Even though up until then he had been a loyal Communist Party member. This was not particularly unusual, as millions of Chinese were similarly persecuted during that time. A note is China's Great Cultural Revolution, a period of large-scale persecution, anarchy, and violence, was started by Mao Zedong in 1966 and lasted, according to many observers, about 10 years. During that time, political outcasts, like the author, were referred to as cows demons, or simply cows. In Chinese mythology, a cow demon is an evil spirit that can assume human form. The places where they were held were called cowsheds, and those who guarded them, cowboys. In addition to the hard labor, they were subjected to public humiliation in mass meetings devoted to interrogations and forced confessions. But something else was happening to Master O that was particularly unusual. In his mind, a kind of supernatural being began to communicate with him, showing him images ranging from the time of the creation of the universe to what the world would look like in the future. This being, or intelligence, spoke as well of how human beings should conduct themselves in our present-day world. Not a typical Qigong workshop. When he did get to teaching us the actual exercise, it turned out to be rather simple in its mechanics. a series of circling motions made with the hands as we stood in one spot. It could also be performed sitting down or even lying down. What we were doing by making these circles, Master O explained, was capturing the energy of the sun in one set of circle making, the energy of the moon in another set, and the combination of these two energies in the third set of circling motions. There was also an arm stretch in which we opened ourselves up to and then embraced the universe and its energy, and then briefly held the posture in which we imagined our cupped palms holding the golden chrysanthemum, a symbol of the future. At the beginning and at the end of the exercise, we were to recite some phrases, either aloud or to ourselves, pertaining to what the supernatural being had told him about how we should conduct ourselves with kindness and benevolence and other admirable qualities. This supernatural being, Master O at one point told us, had something to do with Pangu, a figure from Chinese mythology who is Pangu, the creator of the universe. It was all very different from the course in medical Qigong my wife and I were then attending, and different as well from any other IG or Qigong class I had ever taken, or any that I had ever read about. Yet I found myself receptive to it. Mythology to me, as a writer of fiction, has become over the years more and more a field for the exploration of reality. Also, I have read with enthusiasm the philosophy connected with the practice of inner alchemy, both Eastern and Western. And so the notion of an exercise that synthesizes the energies of the sun and the moon, gold and silver, within our bodies was especially attracting. I left the workshop thinking and saying to my wife that this Pangu mystical Qigong might be just what I've been looking for. I also left the workshop with my head quite clear, hangover gone. So I knew from the very first session the exercise was good for something. As for the business of receiving communications from a supernatural being, it was not the first time I had met a person who had such an experience. As a young man in New York back in the early 70s, I had made the acquaintance of a peer who had received messages that identified him as Adam. He soon discovered he had powerful psychic healing powers. He became a healer, and as far as I know, is still using his energies to help others. His name's Dean Kraft. Later, when we lived in Boston, I attended the lectures of one who is studying ancient Egyptian symbolism. And on a trip to Egypt, he has received information about the universe directly while visiting a certain temple. What he told us, his message, what he had learned about creation and the universe, struck me as truth I already possessed, but didn't know I had. That was Donald Beeman. At around the same time, I studied ancient Greek literature in translation at Harvard. My teacher, the best academic one I have never had, gave us, his students, his own personal definition of mythology, after eliciting ours. Mythology, he said, is society's way of telling the truth about itself. And that was Gregory Nagy. Again, it touched a truth within me. What happened next was that my wife and I began to practice the exercise on a daily basis. A note, my wife's doing, she decided that she was going to practice it every day, and I felt I had to keep up with her. And what happened after that was what we both began feeling things. Among practitioners of Qigong, these are referred to as chi sensations. In my case, it was strong, tingling in my hands like electric currents, curling my fingers, also heat. Then I began having these experiences when I wasn't practicing the exercise. What is qi, you might ask? It is energy, the energy that animates the universe, that is in all of us, whether we consciously feel it or not. The energy that acupuncturists manipulate using needles. I had had qi sensations before, during acupuncture treatments and also during meditation, but what I was experiencing now was new to me. But there was something else going on as well, something more subtle and also more important. I began to feel better. That is the best and most concise way I can put it. I simply began to feel better. Emotionally, psychologically, physically, spiritually. I'm not sure which of those words or combinations, therefore, would be most accurate. Perhaps all of them apply, but doesn't matter. My wife reported feeling better too. Perhaps in her case, what was happening can be described more specifically. She was going through menopause and had been experiencing some tough times, emotionally and physically. She says she doesn't know what would have happened to her if she hadn't learned Pangu Qigong when she did. As I began to feel more and more energy and continued to feel better, I also had the thought that this phenomenon was something I wanted to share with others. My wife and I became teachers of the exercise, and we also began to practice in a very small way what Master O does in a very big way, passing on his energy to others in sessions that he calls healing and we call energy sharing. I also began to work on the path of life. I had had writing editing experience of this kind before, and when I was first learning Tai Chi Quan in New York City, I helped both my first teachers with books of theirs. I do not know Chinese, and in their cases worked directly with the authors. My teachers, who both knew some English, in Master O's case, I have worked closely with Vincent Chu, a Tai Chi master from a renowned lineage, a fellow Pangu mystical Qigong teacher, and Master O's regular translator for his classes, workshops, lectures, and healing sessions in the Boston area. Vincent and I are now going on to the next volume to be published in the Path of Life trilogy. What is a reader to make of this book? As Master O said in a recent talk about science and religion and Pangu, it is not necessary to accept the Path of Life as factual. Read it as a novel, if you will, science fiction, or as mythology. Pangu says much of the same in the book itself. In the same lecture, he pointed out that there is no conflict between what is said in the book and religion. In fact, he likes to tell American audiences how lucky we are for having our freedom of religion, how unprepared he had been, having been brought up in a communist society, for the idea of a creator, much less anything supernatural. As for what I make of it, I must admit it is my kind of book, presenting as it does mythology as reality, or reality as mythology. The creation of the universe, past conflicts between heaven and earth, including a stirring martial arts scene, interpretations of present day events and people, a fantastic future world, including an earth that is no longer a sphere. Plus, it is at its most basic level the story of one man caught up in two nets at the same time, that of the vicissitudes of a totalitarian society and that of his hidden, all-consuming relationship with the supernatural power. The story includes as well Master O's poignant love affair with his wife, Mandy. Whatever a reader might make of the Path of Life, I know what I have made of Master O, Qigong master and healer, and my former adversary in war, a very good friend. I have been a guest in his house, eaten at his table with his wife and daughter, also my friends, sung karaoke with him, drunk strong Chinese liquor with him, very small amounts. My heavy drinking days are no more, a side effect, let's say, of the Qigong practice. And I have experienced the energy that comes out of his healing hands. I have listened to him many times speak openly, honestly, and emotionally of his experiences, of his hopes for others, of his faults, of his accomplishments. He is in some ways an ordinary person, a good guy, priding himself on his rendition in English of "You Are My Sunshine." In other ways, he is quite remarkable. In fact, the most remarkable human being I have ever met, and a very good cook. Pangu Mystical Qigong has indeed changed my life, as my friend and fellow Qigong teacher Mary Beth Soares once predicted it would. but has not taken over my life. I am still a writer dedicated to and struggling with and delighting in my task, discovering truth through fiction or through my fictional imagination, which more and more I believe is connected to and in ways I do not understand, nor do I need to. The mythic groundwork we live in or spring from. I give thanks to my muse, though I have never met her. When I work on the path of life one, now I am not doing my work, but I am assisting Master O and Pangu in his work. It is hard work, often frustrating and sometimes tedious, but it has enriched my life, and I hope it has done justice. This is the third volume of the trilogy that makes up the complete Path of Life. It is the first volume, however, to be published in English in accordance with the author's wishes. We are now at work on the English version of Volume 1, the next to be published. Readers should have little trouble given the footnotes, especially provided for this translation, along with the introductory material in following this fascinating story. July 2003.